I see.
All right, are we ready to go? We're good? Okay. All right, so.
Only if you want to speak.
I think we're okay.
But if you change your mind, you still can.
Yes.
You can run up in.
You won't even have to run up. All right, so we've already called this meeting to order. We just got out of executive session, and next thing on our agenda is we have, I believe, a few swearing-ins, right? Okay. So I think we've got all three folks here. Okay, great. So I'm going to have Dino, Scott, and Anthony come up to the podium here. And if you guys need a copy of this, there's some on the podium. So, all right. Does this work, Patty?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to have you guys raise a right hand and repeat after me. I solemnly affirm
I solemnly affirm
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
and will obey the laws of the United States
and will obey the laws of the United States
and the state of Ohio,
and the state of Ohio,
that I will in all respects
that I will in all respects
observe the provisions of the Charter
observe the provisions of the Charter
and ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs,
and ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs,
and will faithfully discharge the duties of
and will faithfully discharge the duties of
the office of,
BZA.
yes,
BZA.
all right. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Dino. Thank you, Anthony. All right, we appreciate your service.
Good night.
I just want
Oh,
to,
didn't you say that means you have to stay for the whole meeting?
I got to work it too.
wait, I want to especially thank these fellows. We were absolutely shorthanded on BZA. They responded to my desperate pleas, and I want to especially thank you folks for really stepping up. Thank you.
All right. All right, take care, guys. Okay. Next up, we have announcements, and the one that is listed is, Marianne, are you doing that one?
Well, Lisa.
Or Lisa?
Sure, go ahead, Marianne.
So we wanted, hi. We wanted to remind everybody that tomorrow evening, we are having a special community forum on policing. The title of the forum is A New Approach, an appreciative inquiry to build collaborative policing. This is an opportunity for people in the community to come and talk about what they would like our police department to be. There will be opportunities to be in large group and opportunities to be in very small group settings where you have time to talk one-on-one about what you think is working, what you would like to see the police department be in the future, and your ideas for that. So that'll be tomorrow evening in the gym from 7 to 9. Lisa, do you have anything?
Well, I guess the one thing I would add is that many of you in the community may be thinking, hey, haven't we already done this? Haven't we already talked about this? And what's different this time? And for me, I think what's different this time is a couple things. It's the approach. It's also that it's not a session that's in reaction to a particular event. It's really just a community opportunity to come together. And I've also been impressed and kind of inspired by what Bob Wasserman and Bob Haas once said, I heard them say, is that in 21st century policing, you really need to have like a 5-year vision. And that then all the actions that you take daily, hourly even, daily, weekly, monthly, are going to help to steer you towards that vision. Until you have that vision very clearly articulated, how do you know if you're on track or not? And so I think this is an opportunity. Our new village manager, Josue Samaron, is going to be with us at the event, so he will be able to take a part in it. I think it's powerful that it's happening during this transition time. So I hope that people come. And then I hope they come in a spirit of appreciation and opportunity rather than only to critique, although there always is opportunity to grow through critique as well.
I guess I also wanted to say, one thing that you're implying, Lisa, is that we're in the process of an assessment, the Bob and Bob show. And so the results of this community forum will be going into the assessment and into the, presumably there'll be a 5-year plan or the vision for how we want policing to be. So this is people's big opportunity to have a voice in that.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. Kevin?
Got one. Was part announcement and part update. Last Thursday, we had Thirsty Thursdays last week at the brewery, Yellow Springs Brewery, and it was a success. We got several people signed up for the utility roundup program. We got plenty of cash donations, and there was lots of beer purchased. I don't know if it was drank, but there was lots of beer purchased. We haven't gotten the numbers on what that income would be, but we're also going to have at least 2 more in September and October. So if you haven't signed up for the Utility Roundup program, or if you'd like to donate, just consider those events as well as the information that's in your bill every month.
And can I add a shout out of thanks to the Yellow Springs Brewery, who are so generous to nonprofits in the community, including the Roundup program. Really generous, yeah. Thanks.
And I also thought our Miller Fellow did a great job, Connor. So I know that's part of, amongst the goal to get 50% of our utility users signed up. I saw, Colleen, a number that we have 211 signed up.
At the end of last month, there's been more, and then, of course, we added 29 at the Thirsty Thursday.
29, wow.
And then the farmer's market, that was Saturday, there was another 11.
Wow, great.
Just getting that word out.
So that could be upwards of 30%, if my memory is correct about there being approximately 1,200 utility users or something, so.
About 1,950.
1,900,
Yeah, so
okay,
it's
so 25%.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
15%.
All right, 25% to go.
And
Patty?
I have one quick announcement, and that is that we will be issuing the annual tree trimming RFP here relatively soon. So if you're interested in bidding on that, we'll be getting that out Friday. Johnny's telling me Friday, so.
Okay. Any other announcements? Yeah, I'll just mention 2 things that are coming up in June. We have, of course, the Yellow Springs Street Fair, which is the second Saturday of June. And the last Saturday of June is YS Pride, and the village is happy to be a sponsor of both of those important community events. Okay, so the consent agenda, all we have is the minutes from our May 6th, 2019 meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Review of the agenda, anything, yes.
Could I just make, I just had an email concern about people trying to get into the forum tomorrow night because it's noticed that the road's going to be closed. You will actually be able to get into the forum from State Route 68. You'll be able to get into the Bryan Center. It will be closed by the bike path, not down at 68. So if you want to come to the forum tomorrow evening, please come in from the 68 end.
And if possible, use active transportation, walk, bike, roll. All right. Review of the agenda, anything we need to add, change?
Yes, I want to make a suggestion for a change in the agenda. We have under old business, a report for Beatty Hughes parking proposal. I would like to suggest that we table that for this meeting and instead have a discussion about why we need parking, how that's decided, 1, and 2, how we make decisions about, well, that park in particular as a community property. And I want to apologize to staff and any other council members if I was oblivious during any discussions about parking that happened at council, because either I didn't hear them or it was 10 o'clock and I wasn't paying attention. But I was not prepared for this proposal. I had talked to Brian during the week about my concerns about it, and because of public reaction, I just think that it would be better to take a step back. And so I'm asking if we would be in agreement.
So just to clarify, you're just saying expand the discussion?
I'm saying table that particular proposal and back up, one, to talk about why are we talking about, what are the parking needs? How do we determine what they are? Because I'm not aware of that. And two, how do we, before making a decision about what to do with that park in particular, how do we do that? I think there has to be a robust community process, and I think we need to be clear about how we would move forward with that.
Right, which we always have a robust discussion about these things. So it's Beatty Hughes Park and parking, is that?
Yes, so those seem
Okay.
to be coming together
Okay.
on that topic.
I think that's fine. So, I mean, to me, it sounds like the discussion that,
And again,
Well, you would be
I
having it.
didn't want to, I was not trying to throw staff under the bus or, and I apologize for anything that I wasn't paying attention to, but I just think that that's premature to have that.
okay. All right, well, we'll get
Okay.
there, yep. Okay, anything else about the agenda?
Yes, we are, as you can see, the ordinance regarding the parking lot at 102 Dayton Street is crossed off. We want to table that. Staff needs more time to make a proper discussion of how to proceed with that lot. And we do not want to, we want to pull that from the agenda and table it for the
Okay.
current time.
All right.
Hopefully, it'll come back on the 3rd with a little bit more detail.
When it sounds like if someone's here to talk about that, it will fit into our expanded discussion under old business. Anything else about the agenda? Okay. So petitions and communications, Mary Ann.
Yes, there was a inclusion of the announcement about the police forum tomorrow night. Patty included a sample resolution that you'll talk about, Patty, in your police report, about, to the state.
Correct.
The mayor had monthly reports of cases at the mayor's court, and we had some letters in opposition to having Beatty Hughes Park become a parking lot from Sharon Moeller, Katie Rose Wright, Erica Grushon, and Kathy Adams.
Okay.
I have a question. So was that pulled off of old business? Is that not going to be discussed tonight?
It's going to be, we're basically just taking out the word proposal
Okay.
and still having the discussion.
Okay.
So to me, it's the same discussion. So but we're taking out the
Okay.
word proposal. Okay. So next up, we've got our legislation, and first is Resolution 2019-18. Judy, by title only.
Okay, this is Resolution 2019-18, appointing Judy Kintner, Village Treasurer.
Can I get a motion, please?
I move. Second.
All right, so I'll just briefly explain this. Our charter requires that we have a treasurer. Rachel McKinley resigned after serving with the village for several years, and one of the things that we can have, we actually had before with our prior clerk, was a clerk treasurer. The role of the treasurer is to provide, sort of general oversight. Our finance director cannot be the treasurer. No member of council, not the village manager, according to the charter. So we want to make sure that we have that treasurer position in place. Typically, what the treasurer has done is provide reports around our, sort of quarterly standing with our different accounts. And I will say that we have formalized actually a year ago, an investment and finance committee, which is 2 members of council, village manager, our treasurer, and our finance director. And that committee talks about ways that we can save money, also ways that we can better invest the general fund. And Colleen, remind me, what was that number again of how much we earned or have earned?
What I'm expecting by the end of the year in interest,
Yeah,
that number, 178,000.
178,000. Before, we were earning, I mean, pennies. I mean, not even an amount worth talking about. So by investing our general fund more wisely, we are earning a lot more, and that can go back to fixing infrastructure. So with that, any questions or comments from council? Any questions or comments from citizens? Yes? And then just remember to, even though I think I know everybody's name, to state your name when you come to the mic.
My name's Lauren Miller, and I'm a resident in Yellow Springs. I'm just wondering if there's any downside or any con to having the clerk also be the treasurer? I mean, in terms of workload, other things. I mean, I think at one point there was some assistant to Judy's position that was, I don't know whether that was ever hired or not, but, so is this adding to Judy's workload? And she did not put me up to this. So that's one thought I have. And the other thought is there any checks and balances here? You know, I mean, I have deep respect for Judy, but I'm just speaking just generally as, in terms of looking at a role and function and whether that makes sense. And so nobody's asking those questions, and I think it's valid.
Yeah, I think so too.
Do you mind if I respond to that?
Sure, that's
Well,
fine.
it's actually standard practice to have the clerk be the treasurer. Most clerks are treasurers. When I go to clerk conferences, I would say probably 80% of all clerks are clerk treasurer. So that's a very typical dual role. And you're sort of meant to provide a second set of eyes to the finance director, who serves under the village manager. The clerk treasurer serves under council, so that's some of that idea in terms of oversight. And as far as workload goes, certainly there's some training involved, but I don't see it as being a major time chunk, so.
And I'll speak a little bit more to the checks and balances. As far as if there is a financial expenditure, the treasurer is not in the queue to approve that. So let's say Johnny needs to purchase a piece of equipment. He puts the requisition into the computer. It goes to Colleen. She approves it. Susie down in finance approves it. Then it comes to me for final approval before he gets to spend the money. And the treasurer doesn't have a role in that side. So there is that check and balance as well.
And also, one of you guys down there can speak to the workload thing. And I think we've done some accounting of how much effort had been typically used over time.
Yeah, Judy spoke to the fact that, you know, she's got to attend the training and prepare some reports and things. And I think because you work how many hours? 35. 35, so there's still a little give in her schedule, so.
Yeah, I will just say that what's been most important, I think, is that council has been actively involved in the investment and finance decision-making, and that was something that we actually started talking about 2 years ago, and that has made a big difference, I think, in just looking at opportunities that we have to, again, grow our interest. Before, almost all the money was in U.S. Bank, and it wasn't earning any interest. So there's something called Star Ohio, which is very safe. It's got a really good rate of return. And, you know, this was also out of that finance committee is where we started talking about legal fees and the need to restrict those more. So, I mean, to be honest, the treasurer position, it is a position where, you know, it's that second eye, you know, kind of representing council's interest, but it's also about capturing the data and then giving reports to council that we can digest. So, but thanks for asking those questions. Okay? Anything else? All right, if not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Next up, Resolution 2019-19, and this is, Judy, again, we can do that by title only.
All right, this is Resolution 2019-19, approving a wage increase for the council clerk.
Okay, can I get a motion, please?
I move. Second.
Okay. I'll speak to this one as well. When we did Judy's last review, we decided on a raise at the beginning of the year and a 6-month evaluation, and based on that, a potential additional raise. This was already noted in her contract. And I will just say, we have been thoroughly impressed with Judy stepping up. The village manager hiring process would not have come together as successfully without Judy taking leadership on that. And she's really doing things that, as opposed to that assistant, where there's a lot of filing and sort of, I guess, more grunt work, Judy's been able to really use her training and experience as a experienced clerk to help council. So, questions or comments from council? Any questions or comments from villagers? Okay, if not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Next up, 2019-20, and Judy, we can do that by title only again.
All right, this is Resolution 2019-20, approving a contract with Finance Director Colleen Harris.
Okay, can I get a motion, please?
I move.
Second.
All right. So as you can see, this is that time of the year where a lot of contracts get renewed. I will start off by saying that Colleen has been an amazing addition to the team. She came in always smiling, very energetic. She has a soft but tough approach, which is a good one for this council. And she reminds us about, some of the things that do or don't make sense to do to keep us fiscally responsible. Patty, I don't know if you want to add anything, because you work very closely with Colleen.
Yes, I can't say enough good things about Colleen. She came in and kind of just jumped into being a member of this team and working cooperatively and she helps everybody. Whether she really has the time to do that or not, she helps everybody. She's very, very good at what she does. She's very detail-oriented about the books, and I'm only sorry that I only got to work with her for a year before I'm retiring.
Okay, any questions or comments?
Time goes fast.
It does. Wow, yeah, this year has flown by, and we're really happy. Any questions or comments from citizens? Okay, if not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Excellent. All right, keep up the good work. And finally, we have Resolution 2019-21, and Judy, I think we should read that one in full.
Sure, this is honoring Southwest Ohio Hugh O'Brien Youth, Hobie, for outstanding accomplishments and declaring June 27th through June 30th, 2019 as Southwest Ohio Hugh O'Brien Youth Days in the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio. Whereas Council for the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio supports the Hugh O'Brien Youth Leadership Hobie Program goal to inspire and develop our global community of youth and volunteers to a life dedicated to leadership, service, and innovation. And whereas in the summer of 1958, actor Hugh O'Brien, motivated by the unforgettable experience he had with Dr. Albert Schweitzer, developed a leadership seminar focused on the young leaders of our nation. And whereas the core values that guide the vision of the Hobie team center around volunteerism, integrity, excellence, diversity, and community partnership. And whereas in the 60-plus years that Hobie has been in existence, it consistently receives honors as one of the nation's top youth leadership organizations, with participants in all 50 states and more than 20 countries, over 4,000 volunteers who've logged over 3.5 million hours of service, making over an $85 million economic impact on communities. And whereas Hobie carries out its mission by inspiring young people to make a difference and become catalysts for positive change in their home, school, workplace, and community. And whereas the Southwest Ohio Hobie Leadership Seminar will take place June 27th through June 30th, 2019 at Antioch College. Now therefore be it resolved that the Council for the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio does hereby, Section 1, congratulate Southwest Ohio Hobie for its positive effect on youth and community. Section 2, proclaim June 27th through June 30th, 2019 as Southwest Ohio Hugh O'Brien Youth Days in the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio. Section 3, encourage all citizens to acknowledge the importance of successfully motivating our youth and encouraging them to be an inspiration to others.
Okay, can I get a motion, please?
I move.
Second.
All right. So first of all, I want to say that I will be available for activities during that time, because I know you asked me about that. And also, just to highlight, we passed this resolution last year when it first came to Antioch College. Amazing leadership program. If you have never heard of it, I would strongly suggest looking it up. These youth do some amazing stuff, and it's really neat that they're here in Yellow Springs, and they get to share some of our welcoming community-ness.
And I will add that they will be available for a community service project from 10 to 1 on that Saturday. They have about 12 to 14 students, and so folks with ideas for community service projects that need a big swarm to hit it, please let me know, and I'll let Donna Sizemore know of those ideas.
Great. And can we put that on the Facebook page, too?
Let's see that.
Sure.
Okay, great. All right, questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, great. Okay, so we have no special reports, so that means we are at the time in the agenda, citizen concerns, when we entertain comments of up to 3 minutes from, for any things that are not on the agenda. So if you are here to talk about Beatty Hughes Park or about parking, then that will be coming up under old business. But if you have any other topics not on the agenda, we would love to hear those concerns. Okay. So let's turn to old business. All right. And the first thing we have on the agenda is the proposed pool rate increase. Patty, are you starting that out?
Actually, I think Colleen is going to handle it.
Okay.
Thank you. I've had several discussions with Samantha, and she had put in a proposal a few years ago, and then again last year, for rate increases at the pool. I've been working on the budget and watching the revenue and expenditures, and of course, the general fund has always supplemented it, which is fine. It's pretty normal in a lot of the communities. However, there have not been any rate increases since 2009. And with the cost of all the chemicals going up and the labor and the maintenance, she put in a proposal, and I attached it in the packet on a rate increase. She also suggested making it effective July 1st, if that would be something that would be approved. That way, everybody for this season is already getting their passes at the current rate, and that can continue so we can get most of this year's season's passes at the current price before the increase, if proposed, or if approved.
Okay.
So,
So,
Anything else to add, Patty?
yeah, so the first thing that I want to point out is that if we, in fact, if council chooses to move forward with this, it would have 2 reads, because it'd be an ordinance, so it would be read June 3rd, and then again June 17th, which would actually make it not take effect until July 17th. So that's the first thing. But the other thing that I want to say is you can see that, I mean, it's pretty clear if you look in Sam's report that we haven't raised rates since 2009, and that was by $5 for most categories. We have made an effort to keep those rates down. We have added the Adult Plus One for people who don't want to have to buy the family pack if they're a single parent and want to bring their children. There's the Adult Plus Children. And I think it's a very important piece of Yellow Springs, Gaunt Park Pool is, but the cost is increasing greatly, and I think that we really need to consider raising these rates to some degree.
Okay. Council?
Seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, it seems reasonable to me. I guess the one thing that I do wonder about that I've heard from the community, especially families with littles, is that there's not enough shade. And that, you know, is there some way to use, you know, not expensive, but safe and effective, to use tarps and things to create more shade for little children? And I know that that flies in the face of saying, we need more revenue, and I'm now saying like, but here's a cost. But I do think that's important this season, if it's possible, but I do support raising the costs. And I think that when people see year over year, I mean, what was done last year for the pool was amazing, really made it better for the community. And so if there's a little bit of an improvement, I think that might soften the blow of,
We heard the same thing last year, and one thing I'll say is with some of the money from last year, we actually bought 4 picnic tables with umbrellas. So one whole side of the baby pool will be shaded for parents to be able to have their little ones under the shade, under the picnic tables. And one of them is also a handicap accessible picnic table.
oh, that's
So
great.
we had heard the same thing, and that was one of our focus.
So it's already
So
done.
they just set them up
Awesome.
Monday, last Monday.
Thank you,
So,
John.
and pool passed inspection of the day, so it'll be ready.
Awesome. Thank
Excellent.
you.
Wow. Okay, so I want to suggest that, so I think it is reasonable after 10 years to increase our pool rates, and, you know, keeping in mind that we're the only pool in the county, and, you know, it's been a great community amenity. But I guess I would like to propose that rather than the same increase for all users, that we vary it between villagers and non-villagers. So get to the same increase that is being proposed, but not just because the way it looks to me, all the increases for each category are the same.
So you want the same amount of revenue, but you want it distributed, say, 40, 60 villagers, non-residents, or something?
Sure.
Is that, am I understanding is what?
Yeah, that's the idea. Or maybe even no increase to villagers and divide the increase between non-residents.
That might be difficult. I mean, the percentage, doing it like a percentage, like 30-70 or 40-60 might be feasible, but I think doing it strictly for non-residents might be difficult.
You'd have to look at the financial model to see what percentage of season pass buyers were non-residents, to see what it would have to be increased to
Yeah.
get the same revenue.
Right, yeah, and I think that it's probably more villagers that use the pool.
I like the
Do you
idea though
have an idea?
philosophically.
Okay. We will look at it.
Okay,
We will
'cause-
look at it and bring,
Right.
we'll bring a couple of proposals back on different pages with the ordinance, and then council can choose a particular exhibit to pass with the ordinance. Does that work?
Yep.
That'll work.
I remember from last year, because I remember asking about it, it's a different rate for people who have different economic means. Isn't that true?
We have swim for all.
You have swim for all, and can you remind us all about that?
It's 50, is it 50%? Johnny, do you know? I think it's 50%. You have to, Judy is nodding. It's 50%. You have to see Ruth Ann and present proof of income. It's very simple. There are a lot of different ways to do it. We like to make it really simple. She will give you a form that you then take to the youth center right now until the pool opens to get your pass, or to the pool once the pool opens.
Right. Yeah, that's very important for a lot of our community members to be able to use the pool. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
So Colleen, do you understand where we're going with the different models? Yep.
Yep. Judith Emily?
I just wondered how many people are using the Swimming for All and how well it's being publicized. Because I think, you know, part of the idea behind that was we didn't want any young people or families sitting at home not going to the pool because they felt they couldn't afford the cost. We want everybody to be able to use it. And I don't know, I know they put some kind of thing up at the pool, but I would encourage some kind of a little more of a public notice about it so people are aware of it.
We also do Facebook posts and press releases on it when we do the pool.
So have we put like something in the paper as well?
We have not yet. Ruth Ann was preparing it, but I don't think she submitted it to Bob yet.
Okay, yeah, because I love the idea of let's promote it on Facebook and then let's figure out a way for it to be visible in the YS News.
And would you say again, Patty, how people access that?
Sure, you simply come and see Ruth Ann in my
At the Village
office.
Building?
Yes, here at this building. During regular office hours, she's normally in from 8:30 to 4:30, and she will look at the proof of income that you provide and give you a form that says you're eligible, and you take that with you when you get your pass, and you get the discount.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Yeah, I guess I have one concern kind of,
Matthew
oh, hi, my name's Matthew Kirk. I live on Southview Drive. One concern I had with kind of the shift in strategy to moving the cost to outsiders is just kind of observationally what I've noticed at the pool is people we do bring from outside the community are typically the people who can't afford to go to like the private swim clubs and things that they have in those communities, right? So by shifting the cost to them, it's possible that we're just going to price them out of the only low-cost swimming option that's available to them, and so they may not come at all. So that may not actually end up driving the revenue that we want necessarily to get from it. So just something to consider.
All right, thanks, Matthew. Any other comments? Okay. So we will, I guess, have that on the agenda for next time, right? Okay. All right, next up, we are talking about Beta Hughes Park and parking. And I think that they are related issues in some ways, so I think it's okay to combine them. And so, do you want to begin, Mary Ann?
Yeah. I will say, full disclosure, I've never been a fan of increasing parking significantly. But given that I know that there are people that are concerned about it, at least I think it behooves council to understand what the parking problems are, how much parking is enough, what kind of parking is needed, and how that is determined. And to me, that is very separate from Beta Hughes Park. And the other piece is when we have a piece of public property, especially a public park, then I think we have to have a very thought-through public process on how that property gets used and any changes. And in fact, given that we've talked about doing something which is called participatory budgeting, but really it's a way of having the community get involved in truly voting on things that they think are important, that park and how it's used and changes that might be made seems to me to be something that we might want to think about in that regard, along with maybe some other things. So,
Right.
but that's how, in my head, it really is two different discussions. And maybe it would come together.
Well, I guess they've come together today, so I think that's
I'm
what
saying, I think it's
everybody-
premature for it to come together today.
Sure, okay. I will just say that, I fully agree with everything that Mary Ann just said, and this is a discussion topic, so I want to highlight that I also think it's important that, and it's council's job, to look at the properties, the public properties that we have in town, decide what the best uses of those properties are, and I will also add specifically with the parking piece, one thing that we also need to be thinking about in this discussion is revenue generation to pay for all the infrastructure that needs to be fixed over the next several years. That being said, whenever we put a topic onto our agenda, the idea is that we are going to have a full and robust discussion. And so the fact that that wasn't picked up other times when it was mentioned at council table, I'm glad that people are here to discuss this today. Other comments from council?
Yeah, and I would certainly want to commend Mary Ann for her leadership and sensitivity to try to get out ahead of the issue, because there was a lot of traffic generated about people's concerns, and some people I know are here because they're immediately concerned about it. I also understand the motivation that staff has with respect to the timing for the grant money, and this is, certainly appears to be an adequate, if you will, use for the money, whereas you have to show community good, you know, at the end of that report. And I do feel anecdotally, I've not done a parking study or a traffic study, but I feel like we need more, or it's hard to park sometimes, you know, but I guess a study would suggest, well, is it just during certain times, or did I just pick the worst time ever to try to park that one day? And the way the memo from staff started out raises a critical point, you know, that, you know, paid parking or a more comprehensive discussion of parking or study of parking, you know, needs to be had. Because, again, the memo did say, if we're going to do that, you know, it is complex and requires public meetings, so let's do that. But again, I know that's pushing up against the timeline with respect to use of this money. And so there have been some ideas generated by residents suggesting, okay, well, you can use that money to do some good by considering applying it someplace else. So the grant money, so there's a lot of moving pieces here. There's the grant money that needs to be spent and reported on by the fall. There's a felt need for additional parking. And not sure how the park popped up to the top of the list in terms of the first place to go. But I would think we would want to consider other options first, or any other options, before we consider, you know, paving any park, and this one in particular.
Okay. Lisa, did you want to comment?
Sure. You know, I think it's great to generate ideas. And when I read this memo, I thought, oh, well, it's an idea from staff. So I didn't really pay that much attention to it in terms of critically appraising it, because I felt like there was still a lot of conversation to have. And so I was also concerned that the community, like, perceived this as something that was going to happen, because in my mind, it's not going to happen. But what I think would be great to happen would be to have sort of an inventory and an analysis, a process to say, you know, what is our goal? What is additional parking going to serve? What populations? How can we help the community members who need to park? Privilege the community. I mean, for example, I've lived in two places where, both in Seattle and in Chicago, where there were different parking rules for people who lived in that neighborhood. So, I mean, there's things like that. I'm not inventing this, but, you know, some idea of inventory, this idea of localism for parking while still accommodating out-of-town visitors, and also understanding that overflow parking affects our business owners. So, you know, the Tom's parking lot, the parking lot at the hotel, those become, the laundromat, for example. I tried to wash a bedspread this weekend. There was no parking at the laundromat, and no one was in the laundromat. So I was like, this is another, you know, business where people are parking. So I really think there's a need to look at this more from a process perspective. And, you know, unfortunately, once again, I start to think that it's going to be another big cost, more than just renovating some kind of a, you know, an old parking lot or paving over a beautiful park, that maybe we need to be thinking about the location of a multi-level parking structure that would, in the long run, be more than a Band-Aid. I feel like paving over a park is a Band-Aid. It's not that much parking, and it's not a good decision. But we all know that I worry every day about the cost of living here. We hear about this every day. So then on the other hand, it's like, but I know, let's build a a multi-level parking lot. So, I mean, and that will cost a lot too. So I don't know if there's grant money, I don't know what we can do, but I think there's a lot of work to be done before we make any decisions, and I think that we should take Beatty Hughes Park off the table.
Okay. Kanata?
I am just thinking about one of my first experiences after moving here at Beatty Hughes was actually meeting with Megan and Diane from the paper, and I remember them saying, this is a place where we come to have a meeting. You know, when we get out of the office, and we often come here, we have meetings out here. And so I agree that I think that it's a park that people love and that people use, and I don't really think, as of right now, that it seems like the use of a parking lot would be its best use. I do think that we do need to look into parking. I know that it is an issue, but hopefully we can find a good place for that works out for everyone.
Okay. Marianne?
Yeah, I'd like to come back to the parking thing. I mean, I've lived here since 1972, and I can say I've never had a problem parking in Yellow Springs. Now, it's true, I've always lived close, or walk or bike, but I've never, ever had a problem parking my car downtown in 47 years, I guess it is. So that's why I think it's critical that we make very public what the parking problem is and how many parking places we need to have. And then start looking at, well, where is it going to make most sense to have them? Not flip it around and say, oh, let's put paved paradise and put it in a parking lot because, you know, that's why everyone's here. I mean, at least it gets everyone here. So.
Hey, there's a strategy to get people to
But
meet.
really, I mean, I recognize I'm not looking at it from a business people's point of view, and Tom's parking lot gets used by people who aren't in Tom's. Yeah, I recognize it. But let's start with, okay, this is the parking problem, and this is what would make a difference, rather than just say, oh, let's put parking here.
Yeah, and I guess I think that's what we are doing and will do. And so again, I want to emphasize that this is our first real discussion about this. And we have learned a lot already before we even got to the council meeting. So, Patty?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'd just like to note a couple of things. First of all, you know, staff was asked to consider some of the parking, and as far as various areas around the village that you can park in, we've looked at all of those, we've inventoried them, we've counted spaces. I mean, I've literally walked around the village in the business district counting spaces to see how many we have. Beatty Hughes was one that was publicly mentioned about looking at, and some of the reasons, valid or not, I'm just stating the reasons, were it's close to downtown, there is a sidewalk to get people safely up there, and perhaps it could be the lot that could be set aside for residents to use with a parking pass. So, you know, those were some of the reasons that Beatty Hughes kind of came to the top, and the fact that it has to be engineered, the money was the opportunity, the grant money. We can certainly find another use for that money, and Johnny and I were just talking about that today, you know, about the possibility of doing engineering for a set of public restrooms downtown on land that the village owns. And so there are certainly other things we can use that money for, but that was something that had come to the top, the parking and the consideration of the various parking areas and spaces, and, you know, what could we do fairly easily and immediately to help alleviate that, and perhaps either generate revenue or make a space for residents to park.
How many parking spaces are there? Do you
There
remember?
were 239 total, if you count all of them,
Is that just the public,
just the public,
not counting the
not counting private.
business?
No.
And
That's counting
240.
That's counting 68, Dayton Street, Corey Street, Bryan Center, Subway Lot, 102, we kind of had to guess how many you can get in there, depending on how you park, apparently. because that's a new problem. That's all it included, right, Johnny?
Okay, and I'll just, I mean, one thing that nobody stated, but I think the other reason that Beatty Hughes came up in the discussion is that while I guess some people use it, it is not a park or a green space that we see actively used. And maybe there are reasons why. Okay, well, I'm just saying I'm not just saying that's my personal opinion. I'm saying that that's something that a lot of people perceive. And so, but again, this is why we're having a discussion, right? So that we learn that this is a sacred green space in town, which is one of the things that we've heard. So I think that's enough comments from us, and so,
Well, I still have a couple questions. Is there a way to quantify how many parking spaces we need that would make, and what kind of difference would that make? And also, are there places where parking, well, I'm thinking of like around Mills Lawn, are there places where they already exist, where if we made it a little more evident, people could park?
Yes, absolutely, and those are other things that staff has talked about, you know, the various streets around town where parking could be increased, be they residential areas or business districts. What could we do along Corey Street? Johnny had kind of an idea about on the bike path, and I think someone else might have posted his idea as well about parallel parking along the bike path. But yes, we have had those conversations as well. I mean, today was a kind of a chilly Monday, and there were no spaces in the Bryan Center today for people to park because every one of them was taken. So, I mean, it is a problem. If you want to quantify it by doing a study, we can certainly talk about quantifying it and doing a study, but.
okay. Well, I think we have citizens here that want to speak, and so I
Do we have
want
did people sign up for this, or was that open citizen?
to. Yeah, let's start with the folks that are on our sheet.
And just as a heads up, my problematic timer Delia over there is not responding, so I will be timing you on my phone, and I'll give you a little wave when you're getting to your 3 minutes.
Okay, so I think, looks like the first person I have on here is, well, Village Impact Project.
I think there were a couple of names on there before.
Maybe before, okay, so then maybe Betty Kelly's our first person.
I wrote this before my name is Betty Kelly. We live across, my husband and I live across the street from the fire department, and I am very, very sad they are leaving. I love those guys. I wrote this I'm very passionate and very emotional, and I've not had a lot of sleep in the last few days. And I like what you said and what you said. So this is a very impassioned piece. I found out about this agenda item by chance from a friend. I'm interested that it's listed under old business. I've never seen this item mentioned in the paper, nor were any of the residents affected by the project notified. My first reaction was the Joni Mitchell line, pave paradise and put up a parking lot. Before someone points out that I chose to live there, let me say we did choose in 1992. We chose the house partly for the location because we walk. We walk to all the downtown businesses, what I call the real businesses, the hardware store, the toy store, the grocery store, the credit union, the bank. We support all of those businesses. We have fixed our house, we've landscaped the yard, we've made gardens, and we like to enjoy the ambiance we've created. We deal with the traffic, the delivery trucks, the light pollution from the 2 current parking lots, and the ever-increasing noise pollution, especially during the never-ending festival season. Our house is not central air conditioned. In the last couple of years, we've had to put in a couple of room air conditioners when it gets really bad. So we sleep with the windows open. So noise is a really serious issue, as is light. Your current plan to pave the parking lot means our quality time outside will cease. That's not even to mention decreasing the value of my property, because I don't think it would be very saleable for however much money we paid for it with a parking lot 2 doors down. I find it interesting that a town aspiring to be a tree city will clear cut a park. I find it intriguing that a village that likes to present itself as environmentally conscious and an ecologically proactive community is discussing making the only downtown green space a parking lot to promote yet more tourism. My questions are these. When is the quality of life for the homeowners and residents going to be more important than accommodating more tourists? And why am I contemplating continuing to live here? Thank you.
All right, thanks, Betty. Okay, I've got Wayne Goulden next.
The non-passionate one.
Wayne Goulden, married to Betty. I'll cut most of this out, but you mentioned underutilized, and I guess I think underutilized by man, perhaps, right? But certainly not underutilized by one of the largest and prettiest ginkgo trees around, right? And one of the largest cottonwoods, and some of the prettiest crab apples, and some of the nicest shade-giving maples. That's what makes that park so appealing and why so many people enjoy just having it there, right? Whether people walk through it or not, we look at it all day. And a lot of other people look at it all day, right?
All right, thanks, Wayne. Other comments? Judith? I'm sorry, I just saw you first.
Yeah, that's okay. No. So it seems like that income-generating grant, I would encourage you guys to think about how to use that well, and, as an income-generating activity, because that seems like that's time-sensitive. But I want to say what Mary Ann said. I've lived here for 23 years. I've never had trouble parking in this village. Now, I also bike and walk, but I also drive my car, so to me, I think figuring out what is the real need and how many days a year is there a real need, a real problem with parking. And then I think as a small community, this kind of contained, we've kind of made a decision to kind of contain the size of our community. We need not only more density of housing, new housing that goes up, but we also need more density of use. And we've got some parking lots that are underutilized on the weekend. And they're not right in the downtown, but they're not that far away. And with some good signage and maybe some partnering with Antioch University and Antioch College, I mean, there are parking lots over at Antioch College that sit empty all weekend. And it's less than a 10-minute walk to the downtown. What else do I want to say? Let's see. Oh, the front of the Bryan Center, if we have to have another parking lot, I think is a much better place than this place with these beautiful trees and where there's such a beautiful ambiance, because it's very hot out there. There's no shade, so if you got to put it there. But I think we should figure out, and I think you've all agreed, that what is our need. Tourism, what this raises to me is tourism in our local economy and how we're reading in the New York Times and, just internationally, these cities and towns and villages that are tourist towns, and how they're being destroyed by the very tourism that is the underpinning of their economy, because it's so out of balance. And it's becoming a terrible place to live if you're the local person. So we don't want to, finance that kind of mistake. It raises to me not only the question of parking, how much do we need and where, but also the question of the Airbnb, and which I know you're also going to be considering soon. And I just want to put a plug in for, quick action soon by council on the Airbnb. I think the fairest way to do it is to do it with the citizens in mind. How is it going to help people remain here in the village? That means Airbnbs should be limited to homeowners who are on the property. And I don't think it should be conditional. I think those kind of processes, those kind of bureaucratic processes, what would the conditions be? Are the conditions that a couple of your neighbors got an Airbnb before you moved here, and now you need that to be able to stay here? You need that income. So I think, to make it I feel like that's a really important piece. How does tourism sit in our economy? That question. It's a larger question, but I think both of those issues, the Airbnb and also the parking and putting a lot of cars in the center of the village, we don't want to do that. I think that could cause the out of balance kind of tourism that we don't want to see in our community. Thank you.
Thanks, Judith. Karen Wintrow?
Karen Wintrow. I'm the director of the Yellow Springs Chamber. I went back and was looking at some of my old files. So this was discussed in 2005. I have notes from 2010. So I would really encourage council to use this grant money to do a study. I know that, you know, people don't like to hire consultants, and for some reason, that's become a bad thing to do. But I think it would be a good investment. This would be a very difficult project. To do a parking study would be very difficult for a grassroots or for staff to do. And I appreciate the work that staff has done, but it needs to be quantified. There are so many areas where we can add parking. You mentioned around Mills Lawn. East North College is practically a runway, an airport runway. There could be parking added on both sides of that street. We're just not maximizing the parking we have. It's a discussion that's not going to go away. As I said, it's comes back every few years, big like this, and I have to read it every weekend on Facebook. So it seems that the villagers are the ones that are concerned about the parking situation. If people come to Yellow Springs to visit, they're going to find parking places. My goal would be to not have those cars migrating into the neighborhoods. I'd prefer them not necessarily right downtown, but within close walking proximity. And again, if somebody's driving a half hour, an hour, or 2 hours to get to Yellow Springs, they're going to park somewhere. They're not going to leave. So I think that there are lots of areas that parking could be improved and increased, signed so that people know where to go to get that parking. I can guarantee you that our downtown businesses, and I consider all of our businesses real businesses, they're owned by local people, they work very hard, and they've committed their livelihoods to these real local businesses, and they need this support. I'm a little bit ambivalent about the Beatty Hughes. I think that there are opportunities there. I would not want to take it off the table completely. I think that there are potentially projects that could be discussed for that particular site, but I think at this point it should be taken off the table for this discussion because there does need to be a holistic conversation about parking.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Mr. Conard?
My name is Robert Conard. I lived in Yellow Springs a little less time than Ms. McQueen. I've been here since 2015. Nonetheless, I can verify what she said, that in all the time I've been here, I have never had difficulty finding a parking spot. We support the local businesses as much as possible with restaurants, Town Drugs, Tom's, all the theaters, the live theater, the movie theater, everything that goes on in this village we support, and I have never had a problem parking to reach them. No parking was ever out of reach of a normal walk. Also, you had stated earlier that the park was underused. That's a difficult question to answer. I can only tell you that I have been there for family picnics or family outings. We've played games like jarts and cornhole. We even tried to set up a croquet court, but the grass is too high, and one of the things that might be considered is that there is no public croquet court here. And it is an important sport that people can play almost all their lives. I am a good example of that. Just cut the grass a little more often, and we who play croquet will put in the wickets and the stakes. Right. So the park is used. It's been mentioned, too, that it's a beautiful place. Even when I'm not in it, I drive by it, and I have pleasure in doing that. So we also have to consider that for whom does the village exist? And I think that the main point is it clearly exists, first of all, for the people who live in it. That does not mean that we are going to be unwelcome to guests or not support our local businesses. I think most villagers do support the local business. Now, much of what I said is repetition, but I can tell you that in rhetoric, repetition is one of the best forms of persuasion. So
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, by the way, we'll delete that part about the jarts. So, don't want to get you in trouble. Sherry? That's the dart that hits the kids in the head.
Hello, my name is Sherry Phillips. It's my first time speaking at a meeting. I can only come from a personal perspective. I've lived right downtown for 15 years now, and Beatty Hughes is my backyard. And people, I see people there every day, and I walk past it, through it every day. And it's sort of my personal I feel like it's my personal oasis. It's a peaceful place for people to go, people that work there. It's just a beautiful spot, and I would be personally heartbroken if it went away, and I would like to see it removed from the discussion. I would like to see it separated from the discussion of parking and Beatty Hughes. I would like to see that separated, but thank you for listening.
All right, thanks, Sherry. Other comments? Yes. I'm sorry.
I think we got two people.
I'm John Day. I live on Glen Street, and the park is my backyard. So I'm very, very biased. It is, if you think it's underused, it's probably because you haven't been there. And it is incredibly beautiful. And the ginkgo tree with 17 trunks is a natural masterpiece. Mostly people have said what I strongly support here, and that is, one, we need to think about the role of tourists in our town, and no matter how many parking spaces we put in, more tourists would keep coming, and we'd have to tear down more spaces to put them. I think the idea to maybe use that grant that's available to investigate how can we increase our parking more efficiently, that seems like a much better use. But Beatty Hughes Park is a terrible place to do that. The park, I will say, I think the park is minimally maintained. I mean, it's mowed, but there are parts of it that could be enhanced, and I think that could even attract both residents and people from town. So maybe we spend some money for signage to direct people where the park is, or put in more picnic tables, or clean up the parts that are a little, run down, and make it a gem for our town rather than considering wiping it out so we can put in some more parking. So I think some good creative ideas for that $20,000 have come up that would benefit us in a really positive way, as opposed to destroying one of the natural gems of our town. So I encourage you to investigate alternatives.
All right, thanks, John. Thank you.
I'm Anna Belisari, and I'd like to talk to you from the perspective of the tree committee. We've worked for many years now with the village staff to enhance and increase our urban forest, to maintain it, to keep it going. And I have to say personally that I was shocked when I saw that there was a proposal by village staff to destroy the trees in Yellow Springs, this beautiful park that is used by many people. I happen to live behind it, and if I sit on my upper deck, I can see people using that park every single day. There are kids and families, there are people walking dogs, there are Conards playing games in the park. It is always used. There is no underuse of that park, believe me. I also had some nightmares thinking about what that would look like if the trees were all cut down and the space were paved over. We would have noise. We would have a lot of heat You know that trees keep the air cool and keep the village cool. They absorb rainwater, so we would have rainwater runoff. We would have noise pollution because of the cars and the air pollution. It would be a terrific change of the whole ecology of that part of town. So consider the people who do appreciate the park. There are lots of people who appreciate the park. I've seen them, and I'm disappointed and dismayed that we even consider destroying that park. So I hope that we can keep it going and forget about that one as a parking place. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Other comments? Yep, Matthew?
My name is Matthew Kirk. I live on Southview Drive. So I've been really encouraged by what everybody's had to say about Beatty Hughes Park, because I feel a lot of the same sentiments. Particularly, I feel like it's a place that we could really invest in. You know, when you just making it a piece of grass does not necessarily make something a park. Your most successful parks tend to be activated spaces. They have programming. They have places where people can gather. You know, the picnic tables that are there are like right underneath whatever tree drops the most amount of stuff, like at any given time. So they constantly have to be brushed off. The trash can, even though no one's there, always does seem to be full. You know, so that speaks to a lot of the maintenance issues that a lot of people have. Because I think there is a desire for people to gather in a communal space downtown, and that's not something that we have. So I think, you know, the $20,000 could certainly be utilized to invest in that park. I know we bring up parking, and parking is talked about as a concern all the time, but I also hear from residents frequently that they don't even come into town on the weekends because, not because they can't find a parking space, but because the businesses and the town itself feel so congested and crowded. So it's less of a problem, I feel like. There's pent-up demand just of people that live here. So to provide additional accommodations to have more people come here will just really just make it more congested. I mean, you try to go to a restaurant on a Friday or Saturday night, it's not that nobody could get a parking space, this place is empty. Like, that's not what's happening. So I think this just mindset that like what we need is more parking is not gonna solve our problems, I guess. Another idea we could do with that park, you know, you can create capacity for people to spend time in the downtown area other than just shopping. You know, we could add a small gazebo or some type of small stage with amplified music. You could have a couple spots for food trucks even to increase dining options in the downtown area. I saw this great park in Philadelphia that it was just a bunch of hammocks. You know, it'd be very easy just to put a bunch of hammocks up, people to hang out, you know, and these are low-cost things. These don't cost a lot of money and would provide real return to the community. So, thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. Other comments? Megan?
Megan Bachman, Yellow Springs News. I really have a question more about the process, I guess. From what I thought I heard, that this was the place to have that discussion. So I guess I'm curious, kind of, if would this have been something, if people weren't aware of it, that it could have gotten approval from council tonight, or is this something that would have to have a resolution or an ordinance? I guess I'm curious about that piece of it.
The process would be, if we adopted this proposal, then there would have to be legislation. So there was definitely, I mean, this is, you know, I think really the first discussion from ideas that were thrown out there, but it would not have ended in one meeting. And then the proposal is an engineering study, not, you know, actual construction. So there would have been that process as well. So, so that's a great question. Yeah, Karen?
Since the issue of tourism has risen to the top as being the cause of the need for more parking, I want to address that more people are not going to come to Yellow Springs because we have more parking places. When people come to Yellow Springs, they don't know or care how many parking places we have. They come because we have great restaurants, because we have great arts, because we have great shops, because we have interesting people and we have fun things to do. We have great parks and things to do. That's why they come to Yellow Springs. The parking situation, improving the parking situation is about improving the quality of life for villagers, because it will be easier for them to move around town. It will be easier for them to find parking when they when they come on the weekends. Again, it's not about, that's what we do for street fair. That's why we started doing the parking shuttles, or the free shuttle service, is so that we could get the cars out of town and the buses would bring people in and they wouldn't be migrating into the neighborhood. So to me, this parking study, this discussion about parking is about residents. It's not about visitors.
Thanks, Karen.
So could I make?
Sure.
I just want to make one point about the grant and what it can be used for, because I've heard a bunch of different ideas here, and I think it's important that everyone understand that it must be for a permanent public infrastructure improvement. So it can't be for a parking study, and it can't be for a gazebo and picnic tables. Those are good ideas. I'm not dismissing your ideas. I'm just saying this grant could not be used to fund those things, because the condition is that it be a permanent public infrastructure improvement. So,
And then have a return on investment.
and that, yes, and that it had a return on investment, and that it has to be expended by October of this year.
Yes.
My name's Tina Bujanovich. I just wanted to add one thing. What Karen said, I think people come here because of the green space. It's not just for the arts. They come here for the green space. And I think if you're wanting to do more parking, why do you have to do it on green space? Put it on some place where there's already concrete, like here in the parking lot. You know, add I know it's expensive, but add a multi-tiered parking garage and charge people for that. People will pay. I mean, people pay to park in the Glen parking lot, $5. They'll do that. So I think that's an option. I just think it's not a good plan to use the green space here. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Tina. Any other comments? Yes, Lauren.
My name is Lauren Miller. I have actually more questions than comments. How much money is the grant?
$22,084.57.
Okay. Okay. And I agree with a lot of what I've heard this evening about questions about tourism, how it impacts parking, how it impacts quality of life in the village. And in the social media that I've been connected to, I hear this topic repeatedly voiced amongst a number of different people. And there's more, I'm hearing more and more comments about the quality of life in the village. It certainly impacted our family and how we feel within the village, certainly. So I think that it would be beneficial to take a look at how we've become, our industry is tourism. And obviously, we've had various difficulty through the years of looking at economic development and things like that. And so somewhere we have to negotiate a balance here and figure that out, how to get businesses in, other than maybe simply ones that attract tourists. I do like the idea of a multi-tier parking garage. A couple thoughts I have is, and a question is the area along Cemetery Street where, on the same side that Home Inc. has 4 or 5 houses, is that still available village land? There's an
It is
area
still
that's not.
village-owned property.
Okay, that in itself could be a very good location, although I know it's wet, but I imagine that could be solved. Also, the bike path parking, I think, is a good location as well. And finally, I have heard, just for lack of a better word, a rumor that the corner of Railroad Street and Dayton Street is maybe under consideration by a private individual to purchase that from the village and turn that into an entertainment venue. And if that's the case, we would certainly lose that as a parking location. And I'm just putting that out here for transparency's sake, that if that indeed is the case, that would be a huge change to the downtown as well as to the village, and transparency must be had. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. Any other comments? Yes.
Hi, my name's Sam Jacobs. I plant for the tree committee, and I just wanted to say there's some of the most beautiful trees I've seen in parks anywhere at Beatty Hughes. And I mean, I just don't see why we would use our green space to turn into a parking lot. I mean, if you say it out loud, it sounds really silly. You know, take a park, turn it into a parking lot. Let's not do that. All right, love y'all. Bye.
Thanks, Sam. Any other comments? Yes.
Bethany Gray, and I just want to throw in the conversation that anytime we put anything up that's very massive, that's right adjacent to a nature preserve such as Glen Helen, we have to consider the amount of polluted runoff that is going to affect those nature preserves, because those institutions are working hard to try to keep those environments clean as possible. So just that, you know, obviously we can't control everything around it, but just putting something that close or adjacent to that area. Also, in that area, the thought of an unpaid lot could raise some more problems, because there are some problematic situations that are occurring in that lot near the fire department right now, that some of the organizations, the township, Glen Helen, has been trying to manage. So the idea of bringing more people into an unpaid lot in that area would also raise a safety discussion as well.
Bethany, did you say unpaid or unpaved?
Oh, unpaid, sorry, not a, if there were
A free
a
lot.
large lot that was free.
Gotcha.
Just it would raise another safety question
Okay.
for that particular area.
Thanks. Yes. Mrs. Connard.
That's who I am. I haven't lived here very long, but and I love living here. But one thing that has shocked me since I've lived here is that there are children, needy children in this community. $20,000 isn't very much money today, and I've got no idea, you know, what governs what you can do with it. But I would think if there is to be a return on it, I cannot think of a better return than on using that money to help people in poverty here, especially children. Because I've been really, really shocked to read how many people are in need here. And I don't know anything more precious than people's lives. And I think there are a lot of people in Yellow Springs who agree with that point of view. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes.
I'm Adam Zaremski. Good evening, everyone. Upon hearing today that there was going to be a discussion about the possibility of converting Beatty Hughes Park into an additional parking lot, I thought I would research what scientists have found on the correlation of purposeful nature contact and healthy working environments. I am a single example of the many individuals, some of whom we've heard from tonight, whose employment is located in our beloved downtown Yellow Springs. I eat my lunch in Beatty Hughes Park on a pretty frequent basis, and on nice days, boy, is it swell. I'm sure everyone present could agree that they would rather have healthy working environments instead of the alternative. So what could we stand to lose by removing what is by all accounts a large, open, green space? According to a cross-sectional study done by Aaron Largo White, W. William Chen, Virginia Dodd, and Robert Weiler, all PhDs, in 2011 entitled Healthy Workplaces, the Effects of Nature Contact at Work on Employee Stress and Health, I quote their conclusion. This study's main findings suggest that nature contact at work, as in other settings, is associated with stress reduction among employees. These findings, in the context of the larger body of literature, suggest that the purposeful use of nature contact at work may reduce employee stress. Creating, enhancing, or promoting the use of outdoor break areas, for example, may be one way for health promotion practitioners to cultivate a healthy workplace with nature contact exposures. Instead of thinking about what we as a village can stand to gain from removing the park and adding parking, I simply ask that we talk about what could be gained from keeping this convenient, relaxing outdoor space right in the heart of our town for employees and business owners to take a break during their day.
All right, thanks, Adam. Okay, any final comments? Yes.
Angie Day. I live on Glen Street. I did not expect to say anything, but it'll be very brief. Could the money be used for sidewalk repair in the village, all through the village?
Possibly, well, not 22,000's not much sidewalk, but that is a possibility. Yeah.
Okay. And so because my children grew up near the park, one of our sons named the trees, so it's just awfully sweet. And the other part of the Joni Mitchell song is, don't it always seem to be that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? So that's all. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Actually, I don't remember.
Thanks, Angie.
Thank you.
Okay, any final comments before we wrap up the discussion? Okay, Karen?
There's another piece that council, or that the village is working on right now, the stormwater study, that seems to fit right into this. We're talking about adding hard surface potentially. So it seems to me that as we're talking about adding paving, that we need to wait and see what the results of the stormwater survey are.
Okay, thanks.
I'm still Betty Kelly. I will add one comment. The drainage on Corey Street is horrendous. After a rain, in front of our house, we have Lake Corey, and it goes over, I'm not kidding, it goes over the center line. It is so big, and so here's the lake, and here's the storm sewer over here, and it never gets there because the drainage is such a problem. So, and the sidewalks are too low, you cannot walk on them after it's rained, because every time they pave the street, they raise the street, and that makes the sidewalk lower. So now you're waiting if you want to walk down the sidewalk, or your other choice is to walk in the street.
Okay. And I think that's a good way to end. Matthew?
One last thing, I'm sorry.
Please,
So,
quickly.
One thing we haven't talked about is there an opportunity to collaborate with other governmental organizations in the village? For instance, the schools have a ton of land right there. Is it possible to add parking along the fringes? I believe they also have some tennis or basketball courts that are sitting there in disrepair. As citizens, we own that too, right? So maybe there's some opportunities for collaboration there.
Thanks.
Can I just put in a little comment here, since several of you, you alluded to collaboration. Lauren Miller-Jacobson said that other people needed to be thinking about ways to bring in tourism. I'd encourage you to take a look at the minutes and/or join the Economic Sustainability Commission that meets on the first Wednesday of every month from 7 to 8:30. We're focused on just that. The new Community Development Corporation is a perfect example of a collaboration between the schools, the township, the village. Exactly what you're talking about, that's where those kind of conversations are incubating. So if you are interested in that, take a look at what economic sustainability is doing. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Lisa, and thanks for the input. I think it was a great discussion. What I do want to, and part of why I mentioned that I thought Betty's penultimate comment, but Matthew's is relevant as well, does underscore one of the reasons why we do need to do a parking study, and that is part of what, has been discussed, and that is because these problems that we need to fix cost a lot of money. And if anyone's paid attention to any council meetings, you know that we're constantly on the edge of staying in the black. So we need to, it's our responsibility to figure out how we are going to replace our storm sewer, how we are going to fix those sidewalks, how we're going to action our active transportation plan. So that's why these discussions are important. But again, I want to emphasize that this council does not do anything without a public discussion. And that's why it's great that we have the YS News, it's great that we have Facebook. I'm sorry that people were shocked and appalled, but again, it was a proposal, it was meant to be a discussion, and I think, we heard what we needed to hear. To number one, I think I heard consensus around, we are taking Beatty Hughes Park off the table in terms of parking. And secondly, I think it resonated with everyone that we should do a parking study to figure out not only what the needs are, but also I am interested in the revenue that we can generate to pay for that infrastructure. All right, I have a very practical thought around this. So that being said, I think we can move on to the next topic, and we will add the grant to the next meeting. We will figure that out in June. So if you have to leave, just remember we can't shut the door, so please take any conversations downstairs. Thanks again. Okay. All right, so next topic on the agenda is the lodging tax revenue discussion. So I know council remembers and a few others may remember that I suggested that this was a source of revenue that we should invest in community economic development. I think that's a main purpose for how we convert the revenue that we generate from visitors to something that's productive for the community. And I totally agree with the comments that were made by Karen and others that we are coming at a place of thinking about our community's sustainability and quality of life. So I suggested that we think about ideas, and a couple that I had thrown out at our last meeting just to kickstart our thinking was possibly finishing the sidewalk from Fair Acres up to Stafford, which was something that the village wanted to do to complete the Safe Routes to School project that we got mostly grant funding for. The other thing that we've talked about is the participatory budgeting concept, something that we wanted to start doing, which in simple terms, it's putting it out to the citizens, to the voters, to think about what they want, and you figure out a mechanism for getting those ideas out there, and then what rises to the top. The other thing I mentioned is that we do need to keep in mind that we have these future infrastructure costs, and so that has to always be on our radar. So that's enough from me. I'm curious if other council members had thoughts about this.
I haven't thought about it much. I agree with, and it sort of echoes one of the conversations earlier about the grant money in terms of permanent infrastructure. But I think if we have a definite location, like the one you just described, I think that's certainly a thing we should do, and certainly whatever it is, as long as it is a return, to the community, providing some benefit, just like the grant, as it turns out.
Right. And I did forget to mention, in our first year, the lodging tax earned just over $53,000 that we can reinvest in the community, which I think is pretty awesome.
And I just want to say that we didn't just want to do that piece of sidewalk, we committed to ODOT that we would complete it. So we are obligated to do that,
Right.
so.
Do we have any idea how much of that money, or would there be additional money needed to do the sidewalk?
There's,
The engineer estimates 32,000.
Okay.
32,000 to do the complete project?
from Fair Acres to Stafford.
But I mean, engineering and laying?
No,
The sidewalk.
That's
We had
just-
to redo the storm drain at the same time.
Okay, okay.
that's why ODOT didn't do it, because of the drainage issues.
The drainage issues, all right. Lisa, you look like you?
I do, so you're getting to know my face so well. I'm making faces over here. So it kind of seems like that if there's an argument for finishing safe routes to school and we're committed to doing it. So it sounds like that may be something we just have to do. But in light of thinking, I was thinking about it more creatively, kind of in the long run, and looking at the village values, and it's too bad that everyone left, because this kind of piggybacks on this theme of hunger and poverty in the community. And I've also been inspired by some community kitchen ideas in other communities, looking at Economic Sustainability Commission. And I just wondered if the whole notion of a community center could be expanded. I mean, we have here the Bryan Center, there's the youth center. I know also at the Presbyterian Church, the Beloved Community Group is trying to rally around serving some meals. And I'm just wondering if we could rethink what we mean by community center and try to address maybe a community kitchen, teach some cooking skills, feed more kids. I mean, the other piece of that has come up, and what we've been calling phase 2 of the utility roundup program has to do, and then, there's some people rallying around that repair cafe, is that what it's called?
Yep.
So this whole idea that it's all well and good to help give people cash to help prevent a utility shutoff, I don't want to diminish how important that is, but it doesn't get to the root cause of, a lack of insulation, a lack of skills with insulation, old high-flow toilets, people don't know how to change toilets. I mean, you could just do this whole inventory of things that if people had skills, or if they learned skills, or there were people who had skills, they could do it in exchange for, a barter system. So, I mean, I think that we already have the the Senior Miller Fellows. There's a lot of people in the community that are working on adjacent ideas to these things that could increase the sense of community, that could be lifted up with some funding and a place to make it happen. So, I mean, that's big stuff. It's not very clear. I don't know how we get there, but that's the kind of stuff that I was thinking about, that over the long run would have an immediate impact on people who live in the community. And it isn't just for people who are at economic disadvantage, because everybody could participate, but it would help people with economic disadvantage. So that's my idea, not very well articulated.
Cool. Yeah.
To add on to that, there are a couple of things that are already going on, so maybe it could be, I know with the Yellow Springs Community Foundation, they have their Encore Miller Fellow program that is kind of looking at solving these big issues. So I've been involved in a couple of those, and to speak to the food part, I talked to Tecumseh Land Trust and Community Solutions about perhaps doing something like that, having a community kitchen, maybe having local chefs show how to cook good food and real food, and kind of partner with being able to use the food right from the land. So we've talked a little bit about that. There's also the idea of specifically thinking about housing and issues that community members have. There's a grant that helps for any type of repairs or things like that for low-income folks. So that's probably something that we can also look into, is fixing issues, not doing improvements to someone's house, like we're not putting in granite countertops or anything like that, but fixing issues like decks, like things that are really safety concerns. And that's something that a lot of folks are experiencing, and it's not something that people will openly say, I'm having issues with my house, my roof is leaking and things like that. It's something that is often patchwork done because there's not the funds to fix those types of things. So perhaps it could be kind of I think that's where the participatory budgeting and looking at the issues that we have in our community, those two things can go hand in hand, perhaps.
Marianne?
I was just going to look up an article that I'd seen in Seattle. They have I guess it's a study of affordable housing and affordability, that they're linking affordability and affordable housing, and I'm not sure beyond affordable housing how they're doing that, but actually, I guess that's sort of off topic. Well, one thing would be to just put it in the general fund and help the deficit, so we don't have a deficit. That would be one thing. We could use it to do the housing, or the master plan for the glass farm, and it would be maybe about the right amount. Using it, having a process where doing the participatory budgeting thing where we either start off with some ideas of how it could be used, ask citizens for ideas, and then have a process where those ideas rise up to the top and people actually vote on how it could be used. So, I mean, clearly there are lots of ways it could be used. I guess we sort of have to decide what are the criteria we're going to use to do.
Yeah, well, I think, I'll just say, to me, it's important that this lodging tax, I think a main reason that we established it was because we understand the impacts from tourism, and so I do want to, see that go back to the community. And I'd like to have an accounting for that. I guess that's, sort of why I brought this up. I actually love trying to get into this participatory budgeting and just see how we could set up a mechanism that might work. And, one of the things that I kind of heard last time is maybe we use some part of the money to try that out, and then maybe another part is, finishing the sidewalk piece that we're committed to, or something of that nature. I like some of these other ideas as well, and I think that, there needs to be some development around them, but, and ultimately, we may decide next year that that money needs to go to the new sewer that we have to replace, and some of those lines. But I feel like this year, we should do something a little bit different. So, are we close to kind of making a decision about what we would do?
No.
Okay.
Well, obviously, I think to Marion's point, having some criteria, some selection criteria, some prioritization method, or, acknowledge everything and that we can't do it all at once, and maybe something that rises to the top. Well, if we don't do it next year, sort of pseudo commit to doing it, considering it, allowing it to rise to the top next year. So,
okay.
Any one thing that we can all agree on. I mean, all of what I've heard, and it was very well articulated, by the way. All the ideas, I think, are valid. Certainly, we ought to follow up on what we've already committed to doing. And then, so if there's any money left over, then there's perhaps a little bit that can be put towards, say, second effort.
Okay.
So I made a noise, but then I realized that maybe we have to use it for the sidewalk right now if it's not elsewhere in the infrastructure budget to do that.
Yeah, it's not in the budget.
If we're committed to do it, if it's part of Safe Routes to School, I mean, to me, that seems like an initial no-brainer to have, that we need to do that. On the other hand, I would also offer to bring a brief, like one of my one-pager things about participatory budgeting to an upcoming meeting,
Yeah.
for consideration of council.
And I would collaborate with you on that. I've got some different ideas about how we maximize participation, so that we actually tee that up.
There's a lot of literature about it, so I'm
Right.
glad to hit the library.
Yeah, and I'm thinking more about how we come up with a system where we could actually, moving forward, get a fairly accurate vote, because I think that that could be useful in other ways as well.
I would say coming up with a system would be more important to me than what we would do with it at this point. And I would be happy to put it toward the sidewalk for this time. But if we come up with a system, then ideally, we would have time to use it for next year's
Yeah.
budget.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm looking at, I'm looking at publications, academic publications, about participatory budgeting. And, I mean, there's a ton of resources here
And there is
about
a
successful case studies, there's
organization.
books, and, yeah, I mean, so we don't have to invent this, how to do it. I'll do some work.
Okay, so should we get a, I'm gonna use the word proposal.
Resolution?
No, I was gonna say proposal for the sidewalk project.
Yeah.
Can we get the details on that? And then,
Will there be a discussion involving the audience?
possibly in a minute, yeah, but I think that, that's one area that I think we need to know what the cost specifically of that project's gonna be.
32,000.
That's the engineer's estimate.
Yeah, so if we can just get like the details and then just make sure that, that's got everything, whatever engineering and design and all that. And then secondly, yes, Lauren Miller, if you would like to make a comment, please do.
Thank you. Another question. Let's see. I kind of lost it here. First of all, I thought of community as this. I'll get to my question when I remember it. But when Lisa, when you were talking about your ideas, Community Foundation came to mind, and that could be maybe a real rich opportunity to, generate some real community collaboration that we haven't seen for a while. I think that's a great idea. Okay, this is embarrassing. Yes, here we go. When the lodging tax revenue was discussed and voted on, where at that time did you say you were going to spend the revenue?
So, by law, it goes into the general fund. But from the beginning, at least I indicated that I wanted this money to sort of reflect in community development. It was never decided, and so, this is still.
Got it.
So we didn't make an official policy around that. But it's the only argument that's resonated with me related to the lodging tax is that we do need it, and I want to see that reflected personally in community development. So, giving back to the community.
I could see that, and also the infrastructure issues, because the more people that come into town that are, using and contributing to the lodging tax, there's added burdens to whatever. It also connects to having a public restroom.
Right.
Also. So, okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Lauren.
Good idea there on the public restroom.
Yes.
We started talking about that earlier, so good idea there.
Yep.
Johnny Burns for that one.
Matthew?
I'll say something to Matthew.
Hey, Matthew Kirk from Southview Drive again. So I'm going to bring up a topic that I know council has talked about before, and I think we talked about in the context is probably the single most important thing for economic development the village can do for the future, and that is the Yellow Springs Community Fiber Project. Something like this, where you have a dedicated revenue stream, $50,000 a year, put that over 30 years, that's $1.5 million. That's a lot of money. Attaching something like this to a dedicated investment over time could make a lot of sense for the community and make a project like that more viable. I just think if, at the end of the day, we want the most bang for our buck, I mean, we definitely have projects that need done, you know, whether it's a sidewalk or whatever, but those aren't going to grow the economic capacity of the community. So, thanks.
Thank you. I strongly agree with that. One more pitch for the Economic Sustainability Commission meeting that meets the first Wednesday of every month, 7 o'clock. We're working on a proposal, an updated proposal for fiber, so love to see you at that meeting. Thank you.
I'm afraid to say something. She might
Yeah,
invite me
Kevin.
to the Economic Sustainability Commission. So, I guess I don't want to get too far away from the Greene County grant funds.
Yeah.
And we were talking about things to do with the lodging tax money. Something came to my mind, it was homelessness. Then an offshoot of that conversation was the availability of public restrooms and even a public shower. And so when the conversation, it was mentioned during the Greene County Grant Fund dollars about restrooms, I may have mouthed "and a shower," but I'd like to make sure we, in the interest of time, with respect to the grant dollars getting used and spent and reported on in an appropriate time, unless there's some other overriding need for that money, since it's not going to be used to pave Beatty Hughes Park, might it be appropriate to move that the money be used to do a study to consider, I don't know what Judy's head meant, movement, no,
You can't use it for a study. You have to use it for the actual engineering or construction.
so well, not study then, engineering then, for what would be a minor construction project. So might it be appropriate to continue that discussion and move in that direction, i.e. make a motion if it's not too out of order or too soon?
You're talking about the grant though now, right?
Yeah,
Not the, you changed topics.
I did.
Okay.
Intentionally.
It's getting late, so I'm starting to,
Quick question, Kevin, to your point, could you use the grant to pay for the sidewalk you're talking about, the Stafford Street to whatever? That's physical infrastructure, right? You could argue safe route to school, community return.
Yes, it would, you'd be about $10,000 short, but yes, it's a permanent
So you
infrastructure
could use that and then
improvement.
supplement with something else, right?
Yeah.
That would take that money, essentially make the decision.
Except it
to-
misses the
The
return on investment piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, Kevin, we do need at the next meeting to come up with a specific proposal, vote on it, and invest that money. So,
How about if Johnny and I work on that together?
okay.
And so then how do we define return on investment? This is some economic benefit, I assume, that can be documented in some way.
Yeah, so for example, if it was used for some kind of housing support, then I think you could document return on investment through property and potentially income tax. If it was used to engineer a parking lot in another area, then I think you could argue if that was a
Oh, and
paid
it has to
parking
be
lot.
spent by October. So it
Yeah.
could be used to supplement for a concept plan for the glass farm.
Possibly. I mean, I think we have to look back at, yeah, but possibly.
And so I would just say that I hope that when the discussion does come back about the possibility for the restrooms and showers, since I will not be here at the next council meeting, that someone would consider moving that issue forward on my behalf.
Cool. And you can write something too.
I will.
All right.
that would be good.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, community health assessment update, is that what this is?
Yeah, I don't need that on the agenda at this time,
Okay,
although it is underway, as mentioned at the last meeting.
okay. And then, the ESID Energy Special Improvement District. So I had asked for this to be, included in the agenda again because it appears that we have entities that are ready to move forward. And remember, we learned that we need at least 3 property owners to begin. So we don't need to go in depth. but I think that this is a really important thing for us to do as a village. And so I want to make sure that we move forward, especially with the potential that there are already entities that may be able to take advantage of this. So, yes?
Could I make a suggestion that, I agree with you that this is very important to move forward. I mean, that's why I brought it to council in the first place. But at this point, I feel like it's something that Josue would need to be intimately involved in. And so I'm wondering if delaying it until July to begin putting everything together, if that would not be problematic, I think that that might not be a bad idea to consider.
Okay. I think as long as, I basically wanted a timeline for it, so
Yeah.
that seems reasonable to me. And in the meantime, if council's amenable, actually Karen and I have talked about through the Community Development Corporation that we can start to have some conversations and figure out who is interested, to make sure that we've got those people signing up.
So yes, and I'm also part of the Community Development Corporation. And the one concern that I have about that is that it does need to be its own board with 5 directors, so it can't be the Community Development Corporation.
Yeah, maybe I wasn't clear in the way I spoke, but I mean, like, with that work and discussion that we're having.
Right.
That this would be something that we could get capacity on how to move this forward.
Yeah,
But
'cause I
you're
mean,
right,
to me, this seems like a no-brainer, very simple to form, except for it means another board.
Yeah.
Not even just for us, but just for, the community in general, just as though there's a drain on people who will want to give money, it's just finding another 5 people. It may be some of the entities who want to form this automatically create a board of directors. But I do think that's just the one thing we have to figure out.
Okay. Yeah,
Because it's not us and it's not the CDC.
right,
Yeah.
yep.
So I was here at that council meeting when that man spoke, and I didn't really understand much of what he was saying. So my limited understanding of this is that it's some way of getting a loan to pay over time for certain kind of energy improvements for businesses or something. Is
Mhm.
that sort of what it is?
Yep,
Yep.
Sort of.
yep. So it's an incentive that we could add to our, package of incentives.
In particular for new businesses or businesses that want to expand or businesses that need to upgrade or.
Yep. And they even mentioned that it could potentially be for residential.
And in fact, he mentioned that some places, the entire, all of Yellow Springs could be all
Right.
in. It could be a group of,
So as long as we have those 3, we can lay it across.
We can lay it
The whole
across.
the whole village.
I think it would be good, he gave a long presentation, and maybe it's so complicated it can't be a one-pager kind of thing, but I think it would be helpful to have some kind of one-pager kind of thing that explains what it is, so at least I'd like to understand it a little better.
Yeah,
Can I ask one question on that?
sure.
What's the revenue stream that's diverted to pay back the loan? Because basically the point of a special improvement district is to capture revenue in a given area, right? For
Right.
a special purpose. So what's the stream?
Yeah.
It's a bond purchased through the Port Authority.
So it's additional tax, basically, that'll be assessed on those properties that are, now is it assessed on all properties in the district, or just the ones that are making?
Just the ones that use
energy
it.
just the ones that
investment?
are in.
Okay.
Yeah, so it can be very specialized. Okay. All right, but it sounds like generally we want to move forward, and so we'll get that information together. Okay. New business. And Marianne, I think you're going to talk to us
Yeah.
about voluntary.
Actually, new business, but that's where it's coming from. So in terms of the housing initiative, there are several streams, I would say, right now. One stream is the glass farm. And I think that what's going to be recommended there, and Patty has made this suggestion, is that we hire someone to do a master concept plan for the housing of that. I'm just sort of trying to lay out the whole housing thing. So that's one thing. Another piece of it, which is sort of the overarching piece, is what I would like to, the product that I would like to come out of this with is a housing plan, which is a written document that contains what our vision and goals are, which we have that piece, and then narrative about why we're going to do what we're going to do and what we're going to do and how we're going to do it and the resources, et cetera. That's the narrative, and that has little pieces here and there. Then we have a process of how we move everything forward. Patty has put in the packet the possibility or probability maybe of having the housing, well, not necessarily having the Housing Advisory Board morph into a commission, but creating a housing commission. And all of these pieces are sort of moving, and I'm very hopeful that when Josue comes, that he will be able to have a major role in this, because he has experience in housing, and so I'm hoping that that will be. Then the piece that I wanted to talk about tonight would be one section of the housing, potentially one section of the housing plan. It would be the section that would talk about how does the village government interface with private housing development in a way that encourages mixed income development. And over a year ago, when we first started considering the concept of inclusionary zoning, we called up about a half a dozen people across the country who are experts in inclusionary zoning. And again, they said they did not think that Yellow Springs was the right place to have what would be called a mandatory inclusionary zoning ordinance. That would mean, if we had such a thing, that would mean, for example, that it might say any development that has 5 houses or 10, whatever, would have a certain percentage that would have to be affordable. And there were various reasons why they didn't think Yellow Springs would be appropriate for a mandatory inclusionary zoning. One, you have to have a very hot market. You could say we have a hot market, but you also have to have a very hot market with a lot of housing opportunities going on. That's the part we do not have. And it takes a lot of work to develop a ordinance that's going to work. So we stepped back from that and kept thinking about, well, how can we do this? And the main way, and I talked about this briefly a couple council meetings ago, of negotiating with every particular housing developer separately on providing incentives for encouraging them to include affordable housing in the development. So as I have been continuing to research on this, I realized that the term inclusionary, well, I don't want to use zoning because it's not necessarily a zoning, but what the term that I've come up with is a suggestion to do incentive-based inclusionary housing. That the village would have incentives that most of which we would have agreed, we'd have a list of potential incentives. The incentives could also be things that a developer might want that we might not have on our list that we would be willing to do, and that we would offer these incentives, negotiate a package in exchange for a certain percentage and type of affordable housing. So what I've done is this 2.5-page document is laid out the rationale for why we would do it. The why is, one, the village has said over and over, we want affordable housing and we want it to be mixed in neighborhoods. We don't want it just as much as possible just all in one place. So the only way to have it be mixed is to have some kind of process that's going to support that. And so that's what this attempt is, an outline of what it might look like. So I'm asking council to weigh in on, do you think that this sounds like something we would move forward, whether it ends up being the commission that does this or the Housing Advisory Board, whoever moves forward with this? Not necessarily every particular step of this, but this is just sort of an idea of what this might look like. And I've also listed the kind of, there are a number of issues that would have to be looked into and decided in order to do this. And the reason why I'm wanting to get this moving is because we have some developments that are going to be coming on board. And one of them in particular would be ideal to include permanently affordable housing. And let me just say, the reason that permanently affordable housing is important is for several reasons. One, even if a housing unit for lower moderate income people is built and that household can afford them, over time, the house gets added onto, or the Yellow Springs market raises the cost. And just given the housing market that we've been experiencing over the last several decades, housing keeps increasing. So the house no longer is affordable for that income range of household. So that's one reason. The second reason for having it be permanently affordable is Yellow Springs has a limited size. And while we may increase our borders to some extent, we have a limited size, and if there's going to be resources put into affordable housing, especially if those resources are coming from the community or any governmental institution, it makes sense that those resources stay with that housing unit to preserve the affordability. So those are the reasons why permanent affordability is important. That said, I'm going to open this up for
And
comments, questions.
You did see the village incentive policy? You
Mhm.
got, okay. So, because I think utilizing that document and potentially expanding it would be good.
I think it can work with this, at least the thing I saw, but it's also a different sort of thing. And what I suggested is that assuming we move forward with creating a specific housing policy, that what we currently have be used along with the kind of things that I've written in here.
No, I like what you added on. I think I want to make sure, though, that we don't, I just wanted to make sure that we all remember we do have an incentive policy.
Yes.
And one that is a living document. So anytime we add another incentive, then it should, be part of that document too.
Well, I think this is a good sound outline. I guess I think I was going to make several points that I had questions on, but I think it just sort of became clear as I looked at it more. But with respect to the fact that there's no incentive housing policies in the state of Ohio, and that's whether it's voluntary or mandatory?
There are no inclusionary zoning or inclusionary housing policies in any communities in Ohio, at least that have been documented. So across the country, there are some states that have it that at the state level, California, New Jersey, possibly Massachusetts, probably Vermont, maybe Colorado. Then there are a number of states across the country that have municipalities and counties or townships that have policies. All along the West Coast, Colorado, many of the states along the eastern seaboard, especially the Northeast. Pennsylvania, Illinois, but Ohio. There are no communities in Ohio, at least according to the research, and this was done last year, the most recent research study. And mostly these policies are in areas that have pretty hot markets and they need people, ordinary people, to be able to live there, basically. Seattle, for example. I just looked at something for Seattle. I mentioned that they seemed like they were trying to have some kind of group that was looking at affordable housing and other issues of affordability, which made me wonder, should we try and combine that in Yellow Springs in some way? And I don't know, have an answer to that.
Lisa, were you gonna?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I appreciate the clarity of this proposal, and one of the points that I appreciate the most is that it demonstrates an intention to collaborate on multiple levels. So not only is there a collaboration between the Housing Advisory Board and the village planner and the Planning Commission, there's that kind of collaboration through the entities of the village, but I also appreciate the involvement of a market rate developer as well as an affordable housing provider, and that it's very clear. I mean, I know this document is going to go through iterations and get more fleshed out, but I do appreciate that the expectations of the market rate developer are already getting quite clear, particularly how they will have to document, how they're going to ensure that there is this inclusionary housing while also having some market rate development, and how that's going to stay permanently affordable. Because to me, the permanent affordability is more important than the here and now one-time affordability in terms of the future of the village. So I think that puts responsibility on the market rate developer, and this document made that more clear for me. It's just getting more and more clear for me. I guess the vision is getting more and more clear. I do think the devil's in the details as far as the incentives, but I think we're going to have to start thinking, I'm going to bring it up again, Economic Sustainability Commission. I mean, we're across multiple meetings I'm in with different groups. We're going to have to think differently about incentives. Incentives for this kind of housing, incentives for potential companies that would bring their business to Yellow Springs, and I know that we're always watching the bottom line, but we have to fuel in order to become, more economically stable. So I think we have to think more boldly about incentives than we have in the past. So thank you. I think this is a really helpful document.
I just want to jump back in and add one more thing. You mentioned Miller Valentine, I think the last time. Miller Valentine that's starting or has established a affordable housing division.
Yeah, it really is more than a division. It used to be a division, and then it broke off. It's a separate entity.
So it's, okay, so they're separate companies. So I guess the question I pondered then was, if they're separate, it wouldn't matter, but if the market rate developer and the affordable housing developer were the same company, but you're saying they're separate. Just wonder if Miller Valentine could be there doing the market rate and the affordable, but since they're separate, that wouldn't happen. But I just wondered.
It could conceivably happen.
Yeah,
I mean,
And
they
it's
could.
even contemplated here, when you have a statement that if they don't need that, body or whatever, the affordable housing. So, I mean, I think your outline contemplates that there could be different setups.
Yeah.
Yep.
I did suggest that Susan Stiles come, because this is something that she has been researching as well. So would you like to?
Susan Stiles. I'm just going to speak really briefly and probably cover some of the things you've already talked about. Of course, I am in support of the inclusionary housing proposal. Inclusionary zoning is a tool that increases, to help to increase affordable and workforce housing. And you may ask why we need such a tool, and I think you know. We need it since private developers will only build market rate and higher end housing unless regulations require them to build a specific number of affordable housing. Developing requires the developer to invest money to build housing and the required or necessary infrastructure. And then the developer really wants to sell the housing or lease up their units as quickly as they can in order to protect their investment. Housing that's affordable to low and moderate income families does not provide the profit that most developers want, and it can be difficult to sell because the buyers may need help even applying for a mortgage, let alone being approved for a mortgage. Some of the buyers may want to apply for a rural development loan, which is designated specifically for low and moderate income families. And it has a very low interest rate, but it can be really challenging to apply for. The housing needs assessment makes it clear that there is a need for new housing in Yellow Springs. And it does talk about the need for higher-end housing. But it talks in depth about the need for affordable housing and workforce housing. And I want to specifically talk about millennials, because this is a group that's projected to grow 22.5%. And Yellow Springs needs to attract and retain millennials because they are our future. Yellow Springs, as Mary Ann said, is on the cusp of development. If we do nothing, then the market will build housing that is not affordable to low and moderate income families. Affordable housing will only be built if we use tools to encourage its development. The time is now because the Planning Commission has several proposals to develop new housing. So I encourage you to look at this and to pass it. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Okay. Matthew?
I just want to say a couple other things, and then, I don't want to make this seem like this is simple. I mean, maybe I haven't, but it is not simple. And I think probably one of the first things that I would want to do would be to start talking with Chris Connard and maybe some other real estate attorneys, because given that it hasn't been done in Ohio, we can use models, and I more or less, this outline is from models, but there are a number of factors that we would have to make decisions about, and we would have to make sure that whatever we do is fair and legally
Sound.
Okay.
Legal. All right, I want to come back.
Legally illegal?
Yeah, I want to come back to that point, but go ahead, Matthew.
All right, yeah, so first thing, there actually is inclusionary zoning in Ohio. I know for a fact that the city of Columbus has adopted inclusionary zoning as part of their enterprise zone program, I believe in both the short north and the downtown. Some of the problems that they've run into a little bit, at least as far as from a public backlash standpoint, is a lot of the affordability things are based on percentage of area median income, right? Which we know we have a high area median income. So even if we did 80% of the median income, it'd probably likely be that you'd be able to qualify at $50,000 income or something to that effect, or 40-something, but not what a lot of people think of as being truly affordable housing is one of the things they run into. Additionally, depending on the multi-unit thing, your affordable housing units, because, you know, they're going to end up being your studio apartments, your one-bedroom apartments, because they can meet that threshold of this is an affordable unit, but it's an affordable unit that's a one-bedroom apartment, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get those multifamily units, those three-bedroom units and things like that, that you want to generate just through an inclusionary zoning policy. Also, in a lot of these policies, the developer has the ability to buy their way out. They can put money into a separate fund, and then that fund can be used for affordable housing projects in other areas of the city. Now, clearly, in Yellow Springs, things are different. One thing I want to encourage you in pursuing this housing policy is to appreciate the fact that right now, we have a non-functioning housing market. We don't have anything that's operating in a true market sense, right? Because we have an extremely constrained supply. We've artificially boxed ourselves in. And, you know, when it comes to even talking about the potentials for development, we talk about it in very narrow channels. You know, the glass farm and whatever, as though we're not surrounded by cornfields and other areas that are potential for development, as though we don't have the opportunity maybe with Antioch in the future, depending on what happens there, that could be an abundance of green space that comes into the village for redevelopment. So I think with whatever we do here, you know, it's important to get the ball rolling in an incremental way, maybe focusing on density, reducing lot sizes. That'll help keep costs down for projects like this. You know, the fewer feet of road and pipe and all those things we need to lay helps lower the cost down for the project, which contributes to the building costs for whoever the end user is going to be, right? So we can, you know, kind of mirror some of the problems that high-density city, or solutions that high-density cities have used around affordable housing. As far as local people developing affordable housing, I know Moody Nolan has developed a spec like low-income house that they actually debuted in Columbus and Linden. That may be something to look into, because it was an actual single-family home, which very few affordable houses are actually single-family homes in the way that the market is currently addressing in a lot of places. Typically, it's, you know, a double or fourplex or whatever it is. So, just, there we go.
What was that name?
What,
Moody
of the
Nolan?
Moody Nolan? They're an architecture firm.
Oh,
Mhm.
thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. And I do want to say that we're not ignoring the other activity that's going on. So, I mean, a lot of those observations have been, you know, in the mix, you know, since that Managers Housing Authority, Housing Advisory Board has been meeting. So, but those are great comments. Okay.
And perhaps if we make the Managers Housing Advisory Board a council housing board, perhaps Matthew would be encouraged to apply to be a member.
Certainly knows a lot about it. So the one thing I wanted to mention,
All in favor?
when you talked about starting to talk to Chris about this, I do want us to remember that when we're talking about special projects that I assume will not be under the retainer, that we need to get an idea of what the cost is going to be, so before we move forward. So I guess I would just clarify, like, what's.
I'll talk with you offline more about how we might
Yep.
do that.
Okay.
Because there might be other options.
Yes, sounds good. But, yeah, I definitely support this, ultimately policy around our housing development. I think it's really smart. Okay. Any other comments before we move to our manager's report? Okay, Patty?
I'm just going to hit a few highlights here because a lot of this you can read on your own. So there is a draft ordinance in the packet for making the Managers Housing Advisory Board into a board of council. That can be a topic of discussion for the next meeting, but I wanted you to have the draft ahead of time so you would be able to think about it and the membership and who should be on this board and what you think. I am bringing to you a proposal to make Denise salaried. She has so much going on in the office, and she is also a member of the Housing Advisory Board and should be a member of the Housing Board of Council if, in fact, you take it that direction, because she is our planner and has intimate knowledge of the zoning code and deals directly with the developers coming in. So she started out at 30 hours a week. We made her full-time because she was just working so many extra hours. It hasn't slowed down, and I don't see it slowing down. And she is costing us a lot of money in overtime and comp time. And so it just makes more sense. Colleen and I spoke about it, and I also spoke to Josue about it, and he agrees that we should make her salaried. So I will be bringing that proposal to council as a contract if in fact you are supportive of that.
Okay.
Okay.
I think so. Yep,
All right.
Sounds good.
Local government funds. So there is also in your packet a sample resolution, I believe. The Ohio Municipal League is asking all municipalities to pass resolutions asking the Ohio legislature to restore local government funds to their pre-recession levels. We have, over the past, I think, 11 years, I'd have to look at the dates again, we've lost almost $700,000 because of the cuts in local government funds, and we need to work to get those back. So we need to consider passing this resolution, supporting this, and there is an OML brief about the omnibus amendment, the House omnibus amendment in there, that explains the local government funds. I did ask Colleen to give me those numbers on what we had lost. If it's cut by, if you assume it's been cut by 50%, then we've lost almost $700,000 since 2008. So does council wish to bring that resolution?
Yes.
Definitely.
Okay.
And
Go ahead.
I feel like, let me look at it again, but I seem to remember that the resolution doesn't really talk much about citizens.
And it also, I did just
And so I wanna-
this afternoon, get another sample from OML. They're
Okay.
actually providing a sample, so I may revise that a little bit, because it literally, I saw it when I came back for the meeting tonight.
Okay, because, yeah, I definitely wanted to, emphasize that aspect of it,
Okay.
you know.
And then the other thing is, again, I have spoken to Josue about this. Staff has proposed, and Josue and I have both approved, going to an alternative work schedule for staff for the summer. So you see there that the hours are posted for both the Public Works employees and the Utilities Office and Administration Office. The staff will be working 4 9-hour days, Monday through Thursday, and then a 4-hour day on Friday. And this is for a couple of reasons. First of all, this will make staff more available to the public, because a lot of people can't come in, they have to go to work before we open, or they have to stay after we close, and they don't make it in. This gives more citizens the opportunity to come in and have a face-to-face conversation with staff and to get, concerns handled. Additionally, these alternative work schedules have been shown to increase productivity, because if you're working a longer day, you get into something, you get cranking on it, and you just keep going because you've got a longer period of time. And you don't waste that last half hour or 20 minutes of the day, because you've got another hour on top of it. And also, we have a lot of people who just take off on Friday, half a day anyway. So this just works out better for everyone if we can just go to this alternative schedule. It would be effective Memorial Day through Labor Day. As I said, I did speak to Josue about it. I sent him the sample schedule, and he was in agreement. So.
Patty?
Yes, ma'am.
I support this, and I think it, especially as a test. My only concern is, given how early people start, at least early for me, I don't even wake up at 6:30. Especially for the weekend, with people leaving at 10:30, does it, on Friday, does it really give citizens the time to come in and?
Well, that's
meet
the
with
Public
people?
Works Department. So they're generally out in the field anyway. So this doesn't apply to Johnny, first of all. So Johnny would still be around more like I will. He's not going to the alternative schedule. But that would be the Public Works Department. They start at 7 now, so it actually backs them up a half hour in the morning and makes them stay later in the evening. So that's a minimal change. And then the administrative office and utilities staff, they start at 8 now, so they're actually starting an hour earlier and staying, they're leaving at 4:30, same time, but then it's 8 to noon on Fridays, so.
So most, if people are coming in to see someone, it would tend to be more the latter schedules, where you have utility office and administrative office?
Yes,
Or John?
yes.
Okay.
And I don't believe Denise is not going to alter her schedule. She is right now going to keep the same hours. So I think Colleen wants to work 4 10s for that period. I'm not sure which day she's taking off. It won't be a Monday or a Friday. She actually prefers a midweek day. This also helps people, they can schedule their doctor's appointments or things for that off time. They're not, that way they don't have to take sick time. So helps out in a lot of ways. Any other questions? Does anyone, there is a report in there about the utility roundup that Brian did reference earlier. Colleen is going to give you this every month. She's going to update it, and she's going to give it to you every month with an updated brief from Connor at the bottom. And as she mentioned, we had a lot of luck signing people up at Thirsty Thursday and at the farmer's market and gathering some cash donations. So.
Okay, and then if we can just add to that sheet what the total number of accounts are so that we can benchmark that
Okay.
percentage goal. Great, okay. Judy?
Just really quickly, anticipating your excellent support, I went to the Financial Investors Boot Camp, did 6 hours, was incredibly baffled and overwhelmed for the first 2 hours, and then started to kind of get some traction there, so it's going to take a minute to get all the way up to speed, but I learned a huge amount and plan to just continue launching right into that. It's an exciting new venture, so.
All right. Well, we need to have a meeting of the Finance Committee soon. Okay. All right, board and commission reports. Anything anyone wants to highlight?
I have one thing, to just let council know what the Energy, or the Environmental Commission is working on. Matthew Lawson and Sue Pfeiffer are passionate about recycling and composting. And so they're working on, looking at how can the village actually have a more robust recycling program? And it is not easy. So I'm not exactly sure how that's going to come out. One thing that we're looking at is actually having a place where people would bring their plastics, because this is how they do it in Logan County. They recycle basically everything in Logan County. And in Canada, Matthew is Canadian, he was in Toronto. In Toronto, they do not only composting, they recycle everything. Now, if they can do it in Canada, gee, you'd think they could do it in the United States. And then, you know, the other thing is, we have been shipping all of our plastic to China, who's not taking it so much anymore. So this recycling thing is just, I don't have a word for it. It shouldn't be the way it is. We are so wasteful, and I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to come up with some options that will work in Yellow Springs. But I just think it's an important topic I want people to know.
Great.
So that one program is for both you and Patty, where I think Vicki Hennessy was involved with it. Is that still going on?
Yeah, there's a container out back by our dumpsters. It's clearly marked, it's a big blue container, and it's clearly marked that you can put your number, what is it, 5s in there?
Okay. So, I don't have anything special on the report side, but I do have a couple of nominations.
Yep.
So, for the Library Commission, so this sort of happened in an interesting way. Actually, the Library Association actually interviewed Dan Kerrigan, and I've, gotten some input from some of the folks there. So Dan, as a professional, was a special librarian at Wright Pat and at Antioch and Clark State Colleges. So he'll be bringing those professional skills to the Library Commission, and again, based on the recommendation from interviews held by the Library Association, I would like to nominate Dan Kerrigan for the Library Commission.
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. So,
and
just so
okay, go
for
ahead.
point of clarification, so did you interview Dan as well?
No, but I did, there was a lot of communication about the right way to do things, and I have informed the folks on the commission, Connie in particular, and Judy has been involved with those communications.
Okay.
She's at least seen them. So we've definitely given them the documentation saying this is the way it's supposed to happen. And then this leads into my second nomination, but then there was some confusion on my part as to who the actual alternate liaison was for the Library Commission. And so I'll take full responsibility for my own confusion. But to clarify that confusion, I'd like to nominate Kanetta P. Sanford as the alternate for the Library Commission.
All right, I'll second.
Oh, are we talking about different, oh, sorry, second. I want to talk about that, our process, but I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Can I have some discussion first?
Oh, sure.
Because you're talking about Kanetta, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't understand that that was the process to talk about changed commission assignments.
Oh, is it a
Because-
change?
Well, she's not the alternate now, right?
Yeah, Mary Ann is.
Oh,
Right, and I mean, I do want to have a bigger discussion about assignments to commissions, and I didn't know that it was just, I didn't know that's how we did this.
no, we normally discuss it at council table. So
But-
I didn't understand that somebody was assigned. So that's what I thought was the gap.
I mean, there was a confusion about who was the.
Well,
I
it's
mean, I
like
think
a
it was
process.
me,
Yeah, I
but-
mean, because
Yeah.
there, I want to talk about other changes too, and I didn't know that
Oh.
I could just go and like talk to somebody and be like, so, will you take over my commission, and then I'll nominate you, and then we'll just make that switch.
Well, I think this ended up being a continuation of a very old discussion because we had a meeting, but I think we have at least 2 or 3 different opinions about who the alternate was. And so it's a continuation of a discussion that got dropped as far as I was concerned.
Okay, so yeah, but the process is, so what I was gathering was that Mary Ann's name was down here accidentally. But if that was not the case, then it is a discussion at council table when we assign or make changes with liaisons. So,
But the confusion is that, it was a mistake, you're thinking it was a mistake, Mary Ann thought she was it, Kanetta and I thought she was the alternate. So I think, I don't.
Confusion.
It was confusing, that's my definition.
Right.
So.
well, I would have just trusted that this was accurate on the sheet, but that being said, I mean, let's have the discussion now. So, Mary Ann, you're asking to
I'm
abdicate?
fine with having Kanetta be the alternate.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm fine with it too, not except, and I have other things to talk about that I've been deferring, so it was properly an agenda item, so I just didn't realize, I just got really confused there for a minute.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
didn't
I think we
understand that was the
can,
process.
I mean, we could make it an agenda item, but if we have boards and commissions reports, we usually allow nominations during that time too. But this is different. I mean, this
Yeah,
is,
it's
right.
another council member, it's not, I mean, I have
Right.
nominations too.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it's different than changing our assignments as council people. But
Right.
maybe I'm making,
No, you're not, you're right, but I think this is a rarity, it's an oddity, that it's not even so much a
cool. I
change,
mean,
it's a
that's just
clarification.
late. Let's just
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah.
So I think, in this case,
Did we actually vote?
are we all, we don't have to vote. I mean, are we all good
Yeah.
with?
Vote on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's that?
I said I didn't think it was something we voted on.
No.
No.
Yeah, so that's, but anyway, so to clarify, if it's not the second meeting, then it should be added to the agenda. If it is the second meeting, then it can fit under boards and commissions. And then, of course, we would
It's
want to
like-
discuss it at council table because there are, 3 council members that would be involved in that decision, so. I mean, you wouldn't be able to talk to, like, the 3 of you outside of a meeting.
Heavens,
No way.
Right, so that's why it has to happen at the council
I
meeting.
never want to talk with them.
Yes. Okay,
But for the record, Judy has been very key in the communication. She's been the hub.
Clearly not all that helpful, but hey, in some fashion.
You've been key, but.
Can I pop back just for a second? And I understand there was a little back and forth about the library commission, and they've been operating a little on their own terms for a bit, so that's a kind of a culture shift. But I don't have any information on Dan Kerrigan. He has never gotten me anything. And it would be a good thing to have, because that is required of anyone else who joins a commission. So I can do that outreach if you're comfortable with it.
I will
can follow
forward
it
you
up.
what I just received,
Great, thanks.
and I'll get more if you want.
Well, we
Just
just,
a letter.
we just have to have a letter of interest or a
Yep.
resume.
We got it.
Okay. All right, Lisa?
Yeah, I already mentioned earlier that economic sustainability is starting to work a little bit again on a Wi-Fi proposal.
Right.
To have Wi-Fi free in the village, so we'll be bringing that. I have two people that I'd like to nominate for membership on economic sustainability. The first person is Scott Fife, very experienced person, lots of knowledge of technology. And the second person is Patrick Lake, business owner, tons of business acumen, lots to contribute. Both have a lot of great ideas and will fill us up. We still have some alternate space. So I'd like to move that Scott Fife and Patrick Lake become members of Economic Sustainability Commission.
I second them both.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. The second thing I'd like to say is we are really actively recruiting members for Art and Culture Commission. We have a couple people on hiatus, so we need to recruit quickly to get back to quorum. We have a list of people who are interested, but we really do need to find people who are interested in the commission and our mission. So, thanks, that's all I have.
All right, thanks.
Oh, but, well, I'll talk about it during agenda planning.
Okay, so let's go to agenda planning then. Okay, go ahead, Lisa.
So I want to talk about commission assignments. And I can give you a little bit of backstory. You may recall when I first joined the council, when I was first elected, I said that World House Choir is really, really important to me. This is a personal thing that I talked about, and Planning Commission is also so important. And I just had to quit the World House Choir for like the majority of the year in order to give adequate coverage to Planning Commission. I cannot be on Planning Commission and serve adequately on a Monday. It's like, it's to the point that I might not run again if that happens. So, but I also want to support Planning Commission. So either Planning Commission needs to change its night, or someone else has to get on Planning Commission, because it needs
the
a strong,
alternate.
I'm the alternate. And Planning Commission, I would argue, is the one commission where the alternate, I think, should be there at every meeting. It is, I feel, wrong when I'm not there, because so much goes on, the decisions are so significant for the community, and I'm up for the task, but not on Monday night. So either, I mean, I hate to put down an ultimatum, but something's got to give, because Planning Commission is going to be, it's either Planning Commission or me is going to be shorted, and I'm to the point where I have to make that choice.
Okay,
So we can,
so let's put that on the agenda, and so I guess that involves kind of two things. One is potential meeting day change, and then the other is, potentially having to change the liaisonship.
Thank you.
Okay. So other things, I'd like to have a resolution supporting YS Pride. We have Chief Carlson's contract.
Wait, as a resolution?
Yes. And we have the county grant. And then I saw some of the other things I had on my list are already there.
Oh, no
Use
resolution.
of the Greene County grant, the discussion?
Yeah, well, discussion/decision. I mean, we need to,
And then, so I need a resolution regarding check signers, which I've already got done. It's just adding Josue, taking off Patty, so just housekeeping. Resolution salarying Denise, supporting restoration of local government funds. And then ordinance creating a housing board mission, increasing municipal pool fees with several iterations. Sidewalk project costs.
yep.
Participatory budgeting system proposal. And then proposal for engineering a restroom shower.
Is that the grant,
Yes.
the restroom shower?
Mm-hmm.
So did I miss something? Are we saying that's what the grant is going to be?
We haven't decided that yet, so it's really more, I think, information
Oh, okay.
about that.
In terms of the ordinance creating a housing commission, whatever we want to call it, there are some issues I have concerns about that I want to make sure we talk about before we approve the ordinance. And I really would like Josue to be here and weigh in on, get his take. So I'm fine talking about it, but I would like to delay a vote until he.
Well, we could start talking about it at the June 17th meeting, which will be his first meeting.
Okay, I can maybe pull out some of the things that I'd like for us to talk about beforehand, to think about.
Okay. And similarly, we may move that participatory budgeting thing to the 17th, because it seems like things are getting loaded up on the 3rd.
Well, that would help to have that little bit more time to do
Yeah,
background.
so let's just plan on that. This AMP portfolio proposal, does that needs to happen on June 3rd?
That was the date we set with them a long time ago, so, yeah.
Okay. And we've got the tech advisors thing on here, and anything else?
For June 17th, Justice System Commission update. We're gonna be using the same timeline, just fast forward to late spring, early summer, so we'll have that updated.
Okay.
And maybe a health assessment update by then, too.
Oh, for June 17th?
Yeah, it can push.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? All right, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. So I think we were right on our average meeting time.
I love
2
that.
hours and 48 minutes, is that what
I love that, part of that article so much.
I did too, to see that stat. That was,
I did not pay attention.
It was really good.